are coming on the air, hitting that deadline right now as we speak that the Israeli military gave for everyone in northern Gaza to get out ahead of what is expected to be a ground invasion starting potentially imminently. Israeli boots already on the ground, one convoy already under fire. The Israeli prime minister saying this is only the beginning. We are live from the Israeli-Gaza border with more on the military moves. Plus, what is next for the civilians stuck in Gaza, desperate to get out? We're live with one Palestinian American whose family's scrambling for safe passage. And new video just into us tonight showing Hamas training for this terror attack 6 days ago, even building a mock Israeli town. The new questions that's raising around intel and security. Plus, back here in Washington, President Biden's message late tonight in his talks with the Americans whose loved ones are being held hostage by Hamas. And even with the pain, the rage, the agonizing grief, a Sabbath that maybe feels more important now than it has in years. The moment of Jewish unity around the world with our team live in Jerusalem. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and as the clock strikes midnight in Israel and Gaza right now, as we are on the air, we are hitting the deadline Israelis gave for Palestinian civilians in northern Gaza to get out. That's more than 1 million Gazans trying to leave. This is a live look here at Gaza City. Listen, it is dark. There's not electricity there. This is what it looks like in that evacuation zone. Now, how firm of a deadline is this from the Israelis? That's not clear. Not yet, at least, with Israel poised to enter the next phase of this war in response to that deadly terror attack by Hamas almost a week ago. One surgeon describing his hospital to us just minutes ago as total chaos, no place to stand. Families in Gaza scrambling, packing what they can into their cars. You see it here, heading into, well, they don't know what they're heading into.
No one knows where we're going, but we're all evacuating.
This map gives you a sense of the movement here, even as the United Nations calls it impossible to move nearly half of Gaza's population out of their homes in the north. You see that in red, down into the south in just a day's time. Across the region, you have tonight some 1,300 people that have been killed in Israel, 1,900 in Gaza and the West Bank. Among them, 70 people killed by Israeli retaliatory strikes on evacuee convoys in Gaza. And on Israel's northern border, a journalist is dead, killed as a Reuters team was providing the live signal. You're seeing that here as part of their war coverage. The question now, when will Israel launch that full-on retaliatory attack that they've been pledging? The Israelis say their soldiers have already been on the ground inside Gaza on a temporary, small-scale basis to try to find hostages and kill terrorists. That is not the incursion, not yet at least, as you're seeing here, more and more tanks lining Israel's border with Gaza. And the prime minister warning Israel will hit back at its enemies with unprecedented strength.
I would like to emphasize, this is just the beginning. Our enemies have only started paying the price.
The world now bracing for more agony, for more innocent people. As we see some of these videos here, these are containers filled with the bodies of Israeli citizens killed in that Hamas terror attack, waiting for family members to identify them. Ellison Barber is live for us along the Gaza-Israeli border. Josh Letterman is in Israel as well. Matt Bradley is in southern Lebanon for us. Ellison, I want to start with you. Obviously, that deadline has now, as of the last 3 minutes, come and gone. Is it functionally meaningful? In other words, have you seen any change in the last couple of minutes? And what is your expectation in the overnight hours there?
So not in the last couple of minutes, but I will tell you, Hallie, it wasn't like since they dropped those leaflets, Israel stopped bombarding or firing airstrikes into Gaza. We are still near the Israeli-Gaza border, but we were even closer a couple of hours ago, and we watched as the sky just kept lighting up orange as it was just hit again and again inside of Gaza. On top of that, where we were standing, rockets came up over our head, fired out of Gaza into the direction of Israel. The last couple of hours here, it's been relatively quiet. If I'm remembering correctly, I think the last time we had to seek shelter and get on the ground because of sirens or something overhead in any direction was around 3 o'clock your time. So things have been relatively calm here and there. We're still seeing over our shoulder the back of the skyline in Gaza area. Gaza's just that way. It will light up orange, and that's typically when something is going off inside of Gaza. A spokesperson for the Israel's defense forces has said that they are planning to focus most of their efforts on Gaza City, because he said that is primarily where Hamas militants operate out of. That area and the southern part of Gaza Strip, that's where people got those leaflets, that warning telling them to evacuate. But Hallie, the truth is they can possibly move south, but there aren't really a lot of options for them to truly get to safety, because there are no exits, no border crossings that are open that would allow them to either enter into Israeli territory or cross into Egyptian territory. That's Hamas is telling residents in Gaza to just stay put where they are. Hallie?
Ellison, to the point that you're making here, is there any indication or any sense that you're getting from the reporting that you and our teams are doing that perhaps Israel may wait on its retaliatory ground attack until more people are able to get safe passage out? Do we have any indication of that tonight, or it's still a question mark?
It's still a question mark at this point, at least from what our teams know and people that we have spoken to. I was speaking with an IDF spokesperson yesterday and was asking him about the calls for a humanitarian corridor, the calls for some sort of green zone so that people have a minute to be able to evacuate. None of that has happened yet. We are not aware of any plans for that to happen. When I asked specifically if Israel would support a scenario where Egypt were to open their border crossing or open some other crossing so that people could evacuate that way, if they would support that and or some sort of pause with it, he said they weren't going to discuss diplomatic relations, but reiterated what Israelis believe is that they believe this is a war on civilians across the board, and that Hamas is the only one that bears responsibility for it. They said they've given warning that Hamas ultimately is the one who should be looking out for the safety of their civilians, essentially, and that while Israel tries to limit the civilian casualty, that really it's Palestinians who are the one, or Gazans rather, Hamas rather, excuse me, who are supposed to be protecting, in their view, Palestinians. Hallie?
Ellison Barber, thank you for being there on the ground for us. Please stay safe. We'll be checking back in with you and your team. Some new video into us tonight shows Hamas had been training for this terror attack on Israel in plain sight, weeks before it all happened. You can see here in a post by Hamas terrorists blasting through a replica of Israel's Iron Wall. That is a replica. They're moving building by building through a full-scale reconstruction of an Israeli town. Josh Letterman is joining us now from near the Israeli-Lebanese border. Josh, let me start quickly here first with the sense, the mood, where it's like where you are there, further north than where Ellison was.
It's definitely very tense. There have been exchanges of fire throughout the day, Hallie, between Hezbollah and Israeli forces. In fact, more than we've seen in the past few days, and that really has people on alert here that perhaps Hezbollah could get more involved in this. We actually heard from Hezbollah leaders within the last 24 hours or so, making clear that they don't plan to completely sit this out. And I could just tell you from spending some time on the ground here near the border with Lebanon in the last several hours, anywhere you go, you pull out a camera, the military shows up. They're very concerned about what you are filming, what you are doing. People here, citizens want to know, are we here because we know that something terrible is about to happen? The level of anxiety is really palpable.
What else do we know as we showed that video, the training video of Hamas, as they are now preparing for this potential Israeli incursion, really any minute, imminently, potentially, about these questions on the intel response, the military response prior to this attack 6 days ago now. It was really right around this time, about a week ago, that Hamas was getting ready to go in by land, by air, by sea, to kill thousands of innocent Israelis.
Yeah, I think this is a question, Hallie, that Israelis are going to be asking themselves, frankly, for generations. How did one of the best intelligence apparatuses in the world miss this? And there's been a lot of speculation that the Israeli government was distracted by Prime Minister Netanyahu's focus on judicial reforms or the West Bank. Today, I spoke with a former senior Israeli intelligence official who told me he thinks this was a failure not of technical intelligence, but a psychological one, that Israelis and their government had so convinced themselves that Hamas preferred to govern, was not going to risk everything, wanted the money that they are getting, was not going to escalate in this way, that even when there were signs, some of them out in the open, things that Hamas Hamas was putting on social media, showing them rehearsing for this. There was a mentality that they did not believe that this was what Hamas intended, and so they did not believe that this was going to actually happen. Now, that's just one former intelligence official's opinion, but it sort of speaks to the way that really the entire security community here is trying to rethink what did we miss, how were we missing what Hamas's true intentions are, and what do we do to make sure that does not ever happen again, because it's happened before, including in the Yom Kippur War.
Josh Letterman, thank you so much for that live for us there in northern Israel. Appreciate it. We're also just learning that a Reuters journalist has been killed, 2 others hurt in southern Lebanon today. Isam Abdullah was part of a crew putting out a live signal with Reuters late today, releasing this video. Reuters muted the rest out of respect, of course. There is an image of the aftermath now coming out that we have. We will warn you, it is graphic, it is disturbing. It's from the Associated Press, showing somebody who's been hurt being carried away. There is intense tension on the Israeli-Lebanon border as we speak. As Matt Bradley well knows, he has been posted up in southern Lebanon now for days. Matt, talk us through what it's like on the ground there where you are.
Yeah, actually, well, we were at that position, well, not exactly that position, but not that far from where that Reuters journalist was killed. You know, this is a situation that's really upsetting for myself and all of my colleagues and for all of the people in the journalistic community. This is, you know, this border has been pretty quiet yesterday, but just today we were treated to a new spectacle. We saw rockets being fired from Lebanon into Israel, and at one point we saw what it looked like, and we don't know if this is the Iron Dome or some sort of other anti-missile system. It shot down one of those rockets, and it started a fire in a wooded area on a hillside, but it looked like it was within Israel, just below a ridgeline. Now, this just goes to show that this is a situation that is kind of heating up. It's not nearly as violent as what we're seeing in the Gaza Strip, further south, or in Israel, but it's a situation that has the potential for explosiveness, and that's why we're watching. That's why the world is watching, even as everybody is transfixed on Gaza and Israel. They're also looking at what Hezbollah is going to do next. And we actually spoke with a member of parliament from Hezbollah. He said, you know, that the decision hasn't really been made. And he said that the decision was going to be up to the leadership of the axis of resistance. And what he's describing here is a coalition of different countries and militant groups that are kind of led by Iran, including Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, Shiite insurgents in Yemen. It's a big footprint throughout the entire Arab and Muslim world. And they all kind of are affiliated with Iran, kind of not. They're all sort of waiting for a decision. We've heard even from Shiite, insurgents in Yemen saying that they might be able to reach Israel with their weapons. So there's a huge coalition that's waiting on the word from Tehran in order to strike. But if that happens, if they decide to put Hezbollah into the game and fight against Israel, it would be a disaster for the entire region, particularly for the people of Lebanon, because this country is facing a financial crisis. It's still in a state of ruin from the 2006 war. The infrastructure still hasn't healed. So, you know, this is a place where everybody is waiting on tenterhooks for a decision on whether or not Hezbollah is going to drag this country kicking and screaming into war. And we've seen just glimpses of it on the border.
Matt Bradley, who is live for us there along the border. Matt, obviously, a lot of people thinking of you and your crew. Please stay safe. Appreciate it. Going back down now to southern Israel, to Gaza specifically, just across the border. I want to bring in Layla El-Haddad, whose cousin and other 20 family members managed to make it to southern Gaza. I believe, Layla, but you still have other family members who are still stuck in northern Gaza, American friends who are trapped there, too. Can you tell us how your family and friends are doing now?
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a particularly rough day. The ones in the northern, what's considered the northern part of Gaza, they're on the outskirts of Gaza City. My uncle, his kids and grandchildren, all of them tried to evacuate that area because they were told that it's no longer safe. And after beginning to make the journey down south, they saw thousands upon thousands of people in the streets, some of them walking 30 kilometers or so with elderly on their back. And then shortly after that, 70 of them, as you might have heard, were killed in an Israeli airstrike. So they quickly decided to go back and sent me a very moving message in which they said, we have decided to just stay where we are in Gaza and die with dignity rather than having to flee. So that was the last I heard from them. And then my family, I have other family in the South who have had to move around continuously, receiving different possibilities and threats that their house might be bombed. And so they're sheltering in place over there.
How are communications now, Leila, with, we know, the electricity obviously going out, questions around internet connectivity, et cetera? Have you been able to hear from anybody even in just the last, half hour or so, or is it diminishing?
I've lost touch with a lot of people, but I have been able to send WhatsApp messages with the members of my family that are in the southern part of the Strip at the very least. Everyone is literally, before I got on this call, everyone has been messaging me saying, this might be the last time we communicate. We're not sure. Please check in with us. Tell us what's going on. We're not getting news where we are. So I had different cousins literally say to me, just, we'll let you know if we're alive. And if you hear news, try to call us on our landlines or anything that might be working to tell us what's happening, because we're not hearing anything at all.
How are you doing, Leila, being the source of information for so many of your family overseas? Because that is a particularly unique and difficult burden to bear.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it together. It's been a very emotional day. The second day, our entire neighborhood was leveled. But, we're doing what we can to amplify their voices. It's particularly difficult because this started with, on the Israeli side with an attempt to a media campaign to dehumanize the Palestinian and kind of pave the way for everything to come, and including open calls by elected officials to deprive Gaza of fuel, food, electricity. And knowing that that's the case, and knowing that our government on this end is greenlighting that and complicit, and seeing the different missiles that are being sent and used to kill my people is it's overwhelming. It's a very big burden, but there's an urgency as well on our part, for any Palestinians living in the U.S. with family there to be able to, again, center their voices, amplify their narrative, because there's no foreign press there right now, right? So everyone's kind of turned into a citizen journalist, and anyone who can and is able to communicate is doing so.
I want to just go back to one photo that we showed, Leila, as you were speaking, and I think it's a picture that you sent to us of your family sheltering in, it's kind of like a hallway or an entryway. Here it is, of their house during one bombing campaign. If you were able to talk to your family right now, what is the message? What's the most important thing you want them to know, your family and friends that are there?
Yeah, those are my cousins and their children and their newborn twins. And, the last message that he sent me, again, he gave me that narrative of trying to escape and then ultimately going back, and ended it with saying, I seek your pardon, God, please. And he said, listen, don't worry about us. We're in good spirits. We're fine. He was trying to reassure us because, he saw that we're having a really tough time with this. And he said, don't worry about us. That was the last I heard. And, and if I was to send them a message, I would just say that there are, people, I think what's difficult for them, the last thing out before that he said to me was, what concerns us is your governments and everyone responsible for this. So that's what I said to him, that we have to do everything we can to try to assist in any way, tell your stories and bring an end to this.
Leila El-Haddad, thank you very much for being with us, for sharing the stories of your family. A lot of people are thinking about them and about you over the course of the next few days and weeks. Appreciate it. The World Health Organization has told our team that Israeli evacuation order in Gaza is effectively a death sentence for civilians who are, for example, in hospitals on life support. One surgeon in Gaza there, he was messaging our team in just the last few minutes saying that where he is complete chaos at his hospital. Tens of thousands of people, I'm quoting him here, saying there are people coming in, so many of them hurt because of the chaos from the evacuations. Here's how he described it in a video diary just hours before that. Watch.
As I'm speaking, there is bombing everywhere around the hospital. The building is shaking every minute or 2 minutes. I don't know if we are going to see another day. And I hope my family is okay.
Some of the biggest questions right now in what is this growing humanitarian crisis is where do people go? You just heard that described by Layla El-Haddad, who just joined us, about her family members deciding not to evacuate, to try to stay where they are because they felt like they couldn't get out. I want to bring in Courtney Kube, our Pentagon correspondent, for us. And listen, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been extremely clear that Israel will respond and respond with force to the enemies that attacked them 6 days ago, killing thousands of innocent people in the kibbutzim and elsewhere in southern Israel, largely. What does that, he is promising this ground invasion. What does that even look like, Courtney? How do we even begin to think about that from a practical, sort of tactical perspective?
I mean, any ground invasion of Gaza is going to be extremely difficult. And I mean, just candidly, Hallie, it's going to be very bloodly. You're talking about urban warfare. You're talking about areas that are very tight streets, high-rise buildings, congested with a lot of people. I mean, one of the reasons that some of these families may make the decision, the very difficult decision not to evacuate, is because where do they go? And also, it is such a congested area. We're talking 2 million people in a relatively small place. But, you know, on the point of Prime Minister Netanyahu and many other Israeli officials, by the way, who have been saying that they will respond with force like the world has never seen. Well, we are hearing a different message from U.S. officials, including Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who was in Israel yesterday, Secretary Austin, who was there today. They are saying that Israel has the right of self-defense and that the U.S. will continue to stand with them and continue to supply them with aid, with resources, with intelligence. But we are also hearing these messages of restraint. So one thing that we heard from Secretary Austin today, standing in Tel Aviv next to his Israeli counterpart, Minister Gallant, we heard that that both sides need to adhere to the law of war. Now, he acknowledged that the actions by Hamas last weekend were brutal, comparing them to ISIS. In fact, at one point saying that they were worse than what we have seen, the world has seen from ISIS. But he said the goal here needs to be resolve and not revenge. So that's the kind of message that we are hearing, is the idea that the Israelis have the right to respond here, but they need to do so within the bounds of law, Hallie.
One of the things that we're hearing now is, as you talk about the messaging on this, Courtney, and the way that top administration officials are talking about this, is that the State Department in an email advised against using language like de-escalation and ceasefire or an end to violence, et cetera, in public messaging here. Talk about that piece of it, because that is also an intentional decision.
Yes, absolutely. And it comes after, of course, Secretary of State Antony Blinken deleted a tweet where he talked about a ceasefire earlier this week. State Department defended that decision. But this may be a window or a little bit of a foreshadowing of what the State Department thinks is coming soon. So we've been talking about the potential for a ground invasion. We've seen some small incursions into Gaza just today. Everyone is really waiting for it. I got to say, we've been asking U.S. officials now for days, when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? We don't have a good sense, but people continue to use the word imminent, that it is coming soon. Yeah. And that, I mean, you know, not using some of these words is probably a recognition by these officials, these State Department officials, for what may be to come in this ground defense. I mean, look at some of the video that we're seeing out of Gaza already, these airstrikes that are flattening city blocks. I mean, I think this is a recognition of what we may be seeing soon.
But even before this, Courtney, take a step back first. What did it even look like then to get in and out of Gaza?
It was extremely difficult. I mean, that's one of the reasons that people have been so flabbergasted by the fact that Hamas was able to breach not in one, but in multiple locations, to breach this fortified fence. Not only is it just a tall border fence, but it also has cameras, sensors, quick reaction forces by the Israelis. I mean, it was supposed to be this nearly impenetrable fence with only the checkpoints where you could get through. And so that's one of the reasons that everyone was so surprised that Hamas was able to breach it in multiple locations. But it also then opens up why this could be so difficult, if not, frankly, impossible at this point, for people to get out of Gaza, for civilians to get out of Gaza. That's why Israel dropping leaflets and telling people to evacuate large parts of Gaza. I mean, that's why people are saying, how can they do that and where can they go, Hallie?
Courtney Kube, live for us from the Pentagon there. Court, thank you so much. In just the last couple of hours, we've seen President Biden pointing to the work his team is doing to get Americans captured by these Hamas terrorists home. After speaking on Zoom with several families of these hostages in Gaza, 14 Americans are still not accounted for, with at least some of them believed to have been kidnapped by Hamas. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell is at the White House for us. Tell us more about those conversations and what we know about them, Kel.
Good afternoon, Hallie. The president did have time to personally connect with multiple family members who are connected to the 14 Americans who are unaccounted for. And as you described it, we don't know how many are in a condition of being held hostage by Hamas and how many are missing or perhaps not yet discovered deceased. We just don't know. But for these families, this has been a very difficult time. And the president has said he wanted them to hear directly from him about the efforts that are underway to try to help locate and bring home their loved ones. The president did talk about this a bit publicly today when he was in Philadelphia on unrelated business of his sort of daily messaging. And he gave some time to this whole Israel situation and wanted to speak to the conversations he had had before leaving here with those families. Here's part of what the president said.
They're going through agony, not knowing what the status of their sons, daughters, husbands, wives, children are. You know, it's gut-wrenching. I assured them my personal commitment to do everything possible to return every missing American to their families.
That gives you a sense of the emotion the president apparently felt, and certainly families would feel at this time. So that was a private meeting held on Zoom, as you point out, but a way to bring them together and to have a conversation directly with the president. Hallie?
Kelly O'Donnell live for us there outside the White House. Kelly, thank you so much. We've got a lot more to get to here on the show on the Israel-Hamas war, as it is now 12:26 in the morning there in Israel and in Gaza, including what is the impact that Congress could have to try to get help to Israel, considering they're paralyzed without a House Speaker. We've got a new Speaker nominee. We'll tell you about it in a second. Plus, protests in cities across the country, putting law enforcement on higher alert. We'll talk about what that stepped-up security looks like in just a minute. Cities across the country, back here at home, stepping up security today after a former Hamas leader called for a global day of anger today, with some of the demonstrations coast to coast feeling tense or intense. Police in New York City arrested a city councilwoman today, they say, after she was seen on social media with a gun at a pro-Palestinian rally at Brooklyn College, with police saying she described the demonstrators there as nothing short of terrorists without the bombs. Other big cities like D.C., Miami, L.A., all beefing up police presence as a precaution, with officials monitoring the potential of threats online. George Solis is joining us now. Talk to us about the security posture here in cities in this country, George.
Yeah, good evening, Hallie. It's been beefed up security, as you said. All New York City police officers in uniform, those that are not undercover at least, and they were certainly making their presence known here at this pro-Palestine rally that has not wrapped up in a sense. It was here behind me. They are now marching towards the Israeli embassy, which also has a lot of beefed up security. We also saw drones flying overhead. We saw a number of choppers here. This is all what we've seen play out over the last several days of some of these organized protests here in the city and cities throughout the country. Although this was a pro-Palestine rally, there was a pro-Israel side that popped up here within the last 30 minutes or so. Both sides, yes, it was tense, but there has been no violence. There has been no credible threats. And that's something that we've been saying over and over again. And yes, NYPD and a number of law enforcement agencies continue to look online for any sort of chatter. And that's really what they say. There's been at this point, just a lot of chatter. But fortunately, again, nothing credible that has raised anything to any higher alert, as far as we've been told from some of the senior law enforcement officials that we have been speaking with. Here on the ground, though, obviously we've been hearing a lot of sentiment and a lot of mixed reaction from both sides. I did speak to someone here on the pro-Palestinian side who has a friend who has family in Gaza right now, Hallie, and he's saying some of the things that they are enduring right now, as we've been hearing, are quite difficult. Here's a little bit more of my conversation with him.
The building next door was bombed. And when that happens, the whole block, all the houses there, they get affected. So they ran out as their own building, even though it wasn't bombed, started crippling down. Right now we heard that they're asking people in the north of Gaza to move away from there. Well, where are they going to go? You know, there's no place to go. And
And again, this is one of many stories that we will continue to likely hear in the coming days. The other thing that, of course, not just the NYPD, but law enforcement, frankly, across the country are asking for, Hallie, is for people to be the eyes and ears to see something. If they see something, to say something. So that's really the only other way to combat any potential threats, especially on a day like today. Hallie.
George Solis, thank you very much. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the president of Harvard says the school will not punish the students behind that letter, that controversial letter that said, and I'm quoting here, that Israel was entirely responsible for the violence in that region. She says that while a lot of people find it objectionable, even outrageous, the school has a commitment to free expression. We've told you how the students involved have faced backlash for that letter, including multiple CEOs promising not to hire any of them. Number 2, the CDC says flu rates are starting to go up a little bit across the country. Now, listen, cases overall, big picture, right, they're still relatively low, and they're not seeing the same kind of worrisome spike that they saw last year, but they are recommending that everybody older than the age of 6 months get their annual flu shot. Number 3, Kaiser Permanente has gotten to a tentative deal with its union after more than 75,000 employees went on strike last week. This new agreement establishes higher minimum wages, $25 an hour in California, $23 an hour in other states. It'll also include pay hikes over the next 4 years. The 3-day walkout last week was the biggest healthcare worker strike in American history. Number 4, the Taylor Swift Eras Tour concert movie hit the big screen a day early, making nearly $3 million on night 1, even though fans only had 8 hours to buy a ticket. It's expected to make $150 million just this weekend alone. Number 5, NASA is launching a spacecraft, a little craft, to a pretty rare asteroid filled with metal. It's the first mission of its kind. Scientists think the asteroid has the remains of an early planet's iron core. They hope it can give us some information about how our own planet was formed. Thing is, it's going to be a pretty long trip. The spacecraft's not going to get to the asteroid till 2029. When we come back, we're going to take you down to Tampa after Florida declared a state of emergency, saying local police need help with some of the demonstrations there. We're live in just a minute. Right now, a few hundred pro-Palestinian demonstrators are marching from City Hall to downtown Tampa, Florida, after the state's governor declared a state of emergency in Florida, saying local police need help handling some of these pro-Palestinian demonstrations, and Floridians need help evacuating from Israel. Remember, Florida has the 3rd largest concentration of Jewish people in this country. Sam Brock is joining us now. Talk us through what's happening.
How are you, Hallie? Yes, so right now we are on the streets of downtown Tampa. As you can tell, it's rather loud because it's not even a couple hundred people. I would say there's in the neighborhood of 600 to 700 people, if not more. Very specific instructions given by a coalition of what identifies itself as Muslim nonprofit activist organizations for people to stay out of the road. You'll see right here, there's all these cars and traffic that are coming. I'm going to have you pan down to the side for a second. Look at how close this is. They want to make a point of not creating any sort of safety hazards or disturbances, but to keep this peaceful. Because, Hallie, I know the conversation has been a lot. Cities all over the country, whether or not you will see confrontation between pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel groups. There has been none of that today. This has literally just been people bust in from all over areas of the Tampa region to participate. Palestinians who have used words such as genocide and occupation and described the hundreds of Palestinians who have died every year in this decades-old conflict. What I have not heard so far, Hallie, what I have not heard is any sort of framing about the barbaric behavior, the barbaric cruelty, murder, children killed in front of their parents and parents murdered in front of their kids. You're not hearing that in this crowd right now, but they did want to make a point very clear, which is you can be pro-Palestine without being anti-Semitic, that people are suffering all over the region, certainly in one of the most densely populated areas in the world, if not the most, on the Gaza Strip. And all the families who have died, the 22,000 plus homes, they say, that have already been destroyed, that 90 educational facilities, the 48 places of worship. Those are some of the words that we've been hearing out here on the streets. But again, there has not been a two-way dialogue about what's going on with respect to Hamas stating its purpose of destroying Israel and killing all of these families. I'm going to let you listen now to a little bit of a portion of one of the speakers from just a little while ago. Take a listen.
Supporting Palestine does not equate to being anti-Semitic. There are commendable Jewish organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now that rally against the injustices Palestinians face. Our faith calls us to stand united for humanity.
Hallie, the expectation for today, it's obviously about 5:45, 5:50 right now, so this is going to go on originally until 6 o'clock. I don't see any, sense of the fact this is going to end in the next 10 or 15 minutes. So it could be another hour or so of marching on the streets of Tampa. Last point for you, the police presence. You would expect, of course, with all of the clashes going on nationwide, you would see a lot of police. I haven't. It's probably been 8 to 10, at least around the plaza where they were all gathered, officers, but the police department is nearby. Private security was hired by some of these groups, but there has not been any need for intervention right now. This has been a very calm and peaceful, and certainly very forceful protest so far, but no indication at this point of any sort of violence. Hallie?
Sam Brock, live for us there in Tampa. Sam, thank you for being there for us. Appreciate it. Coming up here on the show, the Israel-Hamas war becoming an issue for voters and a test for the people running for president. We'll talk about how it may be changing the 2024 race coming up. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Washington bureau, police have arrested a 17-year-old in connection to that shooting at Morgan State University that hurt 5 people last week. He's been charged with multiple counts of attempted murder. Police are still looking for somebody else who they say should be considered armed and dangerous. School officials say neither person has any connection to the university. Out of our Midwest bureau, a man in Minnesota is pleading guilty to stealing the Wizard of Oz ruby slippers from a museum 18 years ago. There they are. This is part of a plea deal that'll keep the 76-year-old out of prison because he's not in good health. He says he got rid of the slippers after finding out they were made of glass, not rubies, but he didn't say who he gave them to, and the FBI didn't find him until 2018. And out of our Washington bureau, a piece of marble fell off the Supreme Court last spring. Several court employees told the Associated Press it was about 2 feet long, this big chunk. It fell into an inside courtyard used by justices and their staff. Nobody was apparently hurt. Back now to our top story tonight, that Israel-Hamas war and the humanitarian crisis that is happening right now, also shaping up to be a big test for leaders around the world. And for the people who want to end up in the White House next year, it is already becoming an issue, of course, in the presidential race, with the war underscoring some foreign policy differences among the candidates fighting to win that Republican nomination. I want to bring in Dasha Burns, who's on the ground for us in New Hampshire. Dasha, talk about how this war is impacting the race for the White House, especially as it potentially becomes a bigger issue for voters.
Hey, Hallie, I'm going to use my quiet voice right now because there's folks speaking on the stage, but it's shaking things up in a number of ways. First of all, it's giving Biden this moment to stand up as the commander-in-chief to take this action. You saw his cabinet members overseas this week with some powerful moments there as well. At the same time, you have former President Trump saying, look at how much safer the world was under my watch. Similar line that he had with the Ukraine and Russia situation, saying this would never have happened if I was president. Also stirring up some controversy, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then you have this sort of chaotic moment in Congress. At a time when some urgent action might be needed from the Hill, from the House, unable to elect a speaker right now. And I asked former Vice President Mike Pence about this earlier today, who was in New Hampshire filing for his candidacy here in the First in the Nation caucus state. I asked if that the chaos within the Republican Party on the Hill might have a negative impact. Take a listen.
Do you worry that that could have negative implications for Republicans in 2024? And in general, what do you make of the situation, considering the potential urgent need for action from Congress?
I'm more worried about negative implications for the United States of America than I am about the Republican Party. This is no time for the kind of intra-party fighting that we're seeing.
And Hallie, this is also, of course, laying bare some of the foreign policy divisions among the Republican Party and these candidates, some in the more traditional sort of hawkish Republican position and others more of the America First sort of MAGA wing of the party.
Dasha Burns, thank you very much. Appreciate it. In the last few minutes, we are finding out that the House is going to be without a speaker a little longer. We'll have more on that coming up in just a little bit as this international crisis continues to intensify in Israel and in Gaza. We have a lot more to come here on the show, including the celebration of the Sabbath during wartime. We've got a report from Jerusalem on how people are honoring this night and the Israeli victims coming up. Cities in this country are boosting security with protests and rallies coast to coast. Some students at Columbia University held pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian protests, prompting school officials to close campus ahead of those demonstrations. Stephen Romo has more.
Tensions are high on Columbia University's campus.
We're outside the gates of Columbia University, unable to get inside. We have seen two sides, two different protests going on now.
Administrators even taking the step of closing campus ahead of the pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian protests. While outside groups not affiliated with the university also protested on the sidewalk. Law enforcement taking no chances during Thursday's dueling demonstrations.
So a massive police presence. Seems like there's a...
The NYPD telling me their presence was planned well in advance. Earlier this week, NBC New York reporting a student was attacked passing out flyers.
I don't know if you saw this. It was a student who was basically hit violently with a stick.
The NYPD confirms a 19-year-old suspect was taken into custody. The university issuing a statement telling participants, quote, hate speech, discrimination, or violation of our core values will not be tolerated.
This is the other side of campus. The Palestinian students have walked off campus, and they are now marching along the other side. We made it to the front of the protest of Palestinian students, and we were just told by the leaders of this march that they're not interested in speaking to us.
Some even citing safety concerns. Finally, one student agreed to speak with me on the condition of anonymity.
Brought me up here today as someone who does not condone terrorism, does not condone any sort of violence. It's the fact that we're seeing an amount of power on campus.
That student unsatisfied with the university's response.
We've gotten multiple emails only honoring the loss of Israeli lives, and we stand by that. There should be grief, but also the Palestinian lives.
Everyone who spoke to us agreeing violence is not the answer, but also wanting to voice their grief.
It's a safe space for people to grieve their loss.
And just want peace and justice for their people.
Our thanks to Stephen Romo for that reporting. Tonight, the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, says hundreds of thousands of Israelis are running from their Sabbath dinner tables to bomb shelters as alarms sound across the country on this Sabbath. It's Shabbat now, and Israeli rabbis are telling people to listen to national emergency instructions from the government and the IDF about whether it's safe to go out to pray in the middle of this war. The Western Wall, the most religious site in the world for Jewish people, is usually crowded, especially on the Sabbath. Tonight, you see there, it is practically empty. And Jewish people around the world are posting pictures, lighting their candles tonight. You see some of those photographs here to show support for Israel, for those Israeli families, the victims, the survivors, those who are thinking about their loved ones trapped, taken, and abducted by Hamas. I want to bring Kelly Cobier in, who's live for us in Jerusalem. Kelly, talk to us about what you're seeing there and this moment here on this Friday night.
Yeah, a lot of people saying prayers tonight for missing loved ones, for people they may not even know, for all that the country has gone through just in the past several days. Shabbat, in case you're not familiar, is happens every week. It's the holiday on Friday. It's the day of rest. It starts at sunset and goes until sunset on Saturday. And families typically light candles. Some may say a prayer. They all sit around for dinner. That is the big event. And for a lot of families here, there are seats that are empty tonight. We spent some time with the Eshel family. Their 19-year-old daughter, Roni, they say was kidnapped from her safe room on Saturday. They haven't heard from her since about 9:27 in the morning on Saturday when she and her mom exchanged some texts. She was telling her mom that she's just fine. Her mom said tonight this is their first Shabbat without her. Take a listen to what she said.
They were just having a normal Saturday morning, and somebody just kidnapped them from their houses, from the beds. And as a mother, it's like a living hell for me, because I can't help her. I don't know where is she. I can't do anything to support her.
A lot of families really struggling with that tonight. And not only are chairs empty because of the missing, because of those killed and captured, but also because of the soldiers getting ready for what the Prime Minister has said will be a long and difficult war. And, you know, many reservists being called up as well, Hallie.
And to that point, Kelly, we are hearing now that Israel's El Al Airlines is going to fly for the first time in 4 decades on the Jewish Sabbath tomorrow because of this reservist issue, to bring people in the reserve army back to Israel to fight. We know that a lot of airlines have suspended flights to Israel right now. That in and of itself, I think, says a lot about this extraordinary moment.
Yeah, you know, it's really tough to get into Tel Aviv right now. A lot of flights have been canceled. Airlines still announcing that they're no longer going to fly here. And El Al actually say that they got special permission, a religious exemption in order to fly on the Sabbath. It falls under a special Jewish legal precedent that said saving lives trumps all else, all other religious obligations. So that's why El Al is flying. And there's a tremendous number of reservists being called up. As we've said before, 360,000 reservists. Many of them are in this country, but a lot are abroad as well. This is the largest mobilization in 50 years, if you can imagine, since the Yom Kippur War. And people are flying in from all over the world, from New York, from other parts in the U.S., from as far as India and Thailand. Lots of Israelis coming home to be a part of this very difficult few days, weeks ahead. Hallie.
Can you just take a beat, Kelly, reflect on what it is like at this moment to be in Jerusalem right now?
Yeah, you know, I've been to Jerusalem many, many times before, and it's such a strange mix of this sort of somber, sad feeling, a very quiet feeling in East Jerusalem as well as in West Jerusalem. At the Western Wall today, to see it that empty, to see only half a dozen people there on a Friday was stunning, really. To be here in front of Damascus Gate in East Jerusalem for Friday prayers today, and just seeing a trickle of men all over the age of 50 coming out after Friday prayers. You know, it was remarkable to just see a group of tourists standing in front of Damascus Gate, not the, you know, thousands of people who are typically here for what is also a very important day for Palestinians and for Muslims to come here and pray at Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's a very different feeling, Hallie, and in a lot of ways, Jerusalem almost feels empty. There are police officers everywhere today, but that usual hum of life just seems missing today.
Kelly Kobier, thank you so much for that. Thank you for being there. We really appreciate your reporting here at this moment. Thanks. That does it for us for this hour. We've got more coverage picking up right now. We are coming on the air tonight with new questions about when that Israeli ground attack may happen. Are we minutes, hours, days away as the Israeli government is pledging to annihilate their enemies, Hamas, after that terror attack now 6 days ago? It could happen, as we said, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. Lots of question marks on that. Israeli boots already on the ground. One convoy already under fire. The Israeli prime minister saying this is just the beginning. We're live from the border with more on the military moves. Plus, what is next for the civilians stuck in Gaza, desperate to get out before the fighting there truly begins in earnest? We're live with one student here in the U.S. whose family is scrambling to find safe passage. And new video just into us tonight showing Hamas training for that terror attack 6 days ago, even building a mock Israeli town. The new questions that's raising around intel and security. Plus, back here in Washington, President Biden's message late tonight in his talks with the Americans whose loved ones are being held hostage by the Hamas terrorists. Then cities across the country on high alert tonight after what a former Hamas leader calls for a global day of anger today. The intensity and the tension at some of these demonstrations later on in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we are coming on the air tonight now about 25 hours after the start of that 24-hour deadline Israelis gave for people in northern Gaza to get out, with more than 1 million Gazans trying to evacuate. This is a live look here at Gaza City inside that evacuation zone. Now, listen, how firm of a deadline is this? That is not clear, not yet, at least, with Israel at this point poised to enter the next phase of this war in response to that deadly terror attack by Hamas almost a week ago. One surgeon in Gaza describing his hospital tonight as total chaos. No place to stand, he says, with families there scrambling packing what they can into their cars and heading into, well, they don't know what they're heading into.
No one knows where we're going, but we're all evacuating.
This map gives you a sense of the movement here, even as the United Nations calls it impossible to move nearly half of Gaza's population there in that evacuation zone. You see it in red there, down south to potential safety in just a day's time. Across the region tonight, 1,300 people killed in Israel, 1,900 people in Gaza and the West Bank. And among those killed, 70 hit by Israeli strikes on evacuee convoys in Gaza. Innocent civilians in danger in the first place because Hamas has used civilians to essentially hide behind, something top U.S. officials have warned the terrorists against. On Israel's northern border, a journalist is dead, killed as a Reuters team was providing the live signal. You're seeing footage of that here as part of their war coverage. The question, of course, when will that full-on retaliatory attack come that Israel's been pledging? The Israelis say their soldiers have already been on the ground inside Gaza on a temporary, small-scale basis to try to find hostages and kill terrorists, with more and more tanks lining Israel's border with Gaza. You see that here. The prime minister warning Israel will hit back at its enemies with unprecedented strength.
I would like to emphasize, this is just the beginning. Our enemies have only started paying the price.
The world now bracing for more agony, for more innocent people, as we see some of these videos showing containers filled with bodies of Israeli citizens killed in the Hamas attack, waiting for family members to identify them. Raf Sanchez is in Israel for us, along with Josh Letterman. Raf, I want to start with you. Can you give us a sense? Here we are, 1 a.m. your time, just after 6 p.m. our time. Where do things stand this evening, and where does this go in the next few hours or even day?
Well, Hallie, that's the question everybody is asking. It is 1 hour, as you said, since that midnight deadline. There is still kind of an eerie calm here in southern Israel. This time last night, the night sky absolutely lit up with airstrikes inside Gaza. I can tell you the glass in our hotel was shaking. There was a percussive boom every time these strikes happened. Tonight it's quiet, and we don't know what that means. We don't know if this is the calm before the storm. We don't know if it is an indication that Israel feels it has achieved its objectives from the air and it is now ready to send its ground troops in. But people in Gaza even are reporting that for the first time in a week, you can go 10 minutes without hearing an airstrike, which is a rare thing, and in an odd way is perhaps more anxiety-inducing than the familiar pounding of strikes that have been going on for 7 days now. I can tell you, Hallie, this is a country on an absolute war footing. When you drive around the roads of southern Israel, it is an endless stream in all directions of Israeli military vehicles, literally even just in this immediate area, we are seeing troops on every corner. You seem to bump into them wherever you go. Kelly was just talking about 300,000 plus Israeli reservists mobilized, the largest mobilization in a generation. You do not call up that many troops unless you are planning an invasion on a large scale. And you do not, Hallie, tell 1 million Palestinian civilians to pack up their entire lives and move with 24 hours notice unless you are planning something unprecedented in northern Gaza. Hallie.
We talked about how some Israeli boots have already been on the ground in Gaza, not as part of this full-scale ground incursion, right, Raf, but as these smaller military operations to try to find people who'd been kidnapped by Hamas and to try to kill some of those Hamas terrorists. Can you tell us any more about that? Do we know anything else? IDF made those announcements just hours ago.
Yeah, so our understanding of this, Hallie, is that this is a small IDF commando unit operating behind enemy lines, as it were. This is not what Israelis sometimes call the big army. This is not the tanks, the artillery, the massive infantry. This is the surgical, precise special forces operators. Now, the Israeli military says they killed a number of Hamas militants inside of the Gaza border, but that their primary mission was they were searching for any sign of these Israeli hostages. We don't know what that search looked like. We don't know if they were physically walking the ground trying to find what we think are the tunnels underneath Gaza where these hostages are being held. We don't know if they were out trying to capture a high-value target, some Hamas official who might have information that could lead Israeli forces to the hostages. But the fact that they are operating on the ground on the other side is a possible precursor to the much, much larger invasion to come. Hallie.
You talk about, Raf, how the Israelis blanketed parts of Gaza with leaflets telling civilians to try to get out. It is part of this tee up, essentially, and we're looking at some video of that there as part of the lead up to what is expected to be this broader operation here. The King of Jordan met with the U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken today, where they talked about the idea for these humanitarian borders to try to get people out. Do you have any better sense of progress on that point, getting medical help and resources to people in Gaza who need it?
People are not optimistic, Hallie. The borders are sealed. The Israeli military is preparing to go in. It is just not at all obvious how you engineer a humanitarian corridor in the middle of what everybody expects is about to be a massive ground invasion. You mentioned these warnings to the Palestinian population. This is a little surreal, Hallie, but the Israeli military has an Arabic language spokesman, and he is somewhat of a celebrity, if that's not too macabre a word, in Gaza. People pay unbelievably close attention to what he says because he is the one who is issuing these warnings, usually on social media, but in this case, literally physically dropping leaflets from the air, telling people to move. And people listen. They take this seriously. I was speaking to a young mother in Gaza. She has moved twice, and she's moving because of these instructions, these warnings from the Israeli military. Hallie?
We spoke with somebody just about an hour ago, a Palestinian-American woman who has family in Gaza, who said that some of her family members decided simply after seeing the chaos outside to stay in their home, knowing the risk that that puts their life in. Explain why these civilians are at risk in the first place, Rob.
Well, there's no bomb shelters inside Gaza. People in Israel will say that's because Hamas uses the money that it gets to build weapons instead of building bomb shelters for its civilian population. But, Hallie, I'll tell you, a lot of Palestinians simply do not leave their homes because a big national trauma for the Palestinian people is that they feel that they have been pushed out of their homes repeatedly over the years in this decades-long conflict with Israel. And they're absolutely determined, in their view, not to be displaced again. So when Israel says leave for your own safety, many Palestinians see an effort to push the Palestinian people once again further out of what they see as their historic homelands. Hallie?
Raf Sanchez, who is live for us there in Israel. Raf, thank you for your reporting. In just the last hour, new reporting from our team here at NBC News, exclusively obtaining some documents that show that Hamas created these detailed plans to target elementary schools and a youth center in one neighborhood in Israel with the goal to, I'm quoting here, kill as many people as possible. The attack plans, labeled top secret in Arabic, appear to show orders for 2 highly trained units for Hamas. The documents found on the bodies of Hamas terrorists by Israeli first responders. Josh Letterman is joining us now from near the Israel-Lebanon border. And Josh, the carnage of what happened, the babies killed in front of parents, the parents killed in front of children 6 days ago now in Israel is horrific enough. And now these plans detail to some degree that this was the intention by these Hamas terrorists here. Talk us through this new reporting from NBC News and the significance.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Hallie. For anyone who is arguing that perhaps the brutality of what we saw in the attacks on Saturday was not premeditated, was not part of the point of what Hamas was doing, these documents seem to really throw cold water on that. Our colleague Anna Schechter exclusively obtaining these documents, which are extraordinarily detailed. We're talking about maps showing a specific kibbutzim in Israel, including a blue circle targeting Kfar Aza, which is one of the kibbutzim that was the most badly hit in those attacks. It makes clear exactly what the goals of those Hamas units were: to go in, kill as many people as possible, to take hostages, and then to quickly bring those hostages into the Gaza Strip. And that, of course, is exactly what happened. These documents in Arabic are marked top secret, and they include all kinds of details that make clear just the extent of the pre-planning and plotting by Hamas as they were training these 2 highly specialized units to carry out these attacks. And the fact that for some of the claims that we've heard from Hamas that they were not targeting children or innocents, these documents seem to make clear that that was a part of the plan all along.
U.S. officials have made very clear their view that Israel has not just a right but an obligation to defend itself after this attack, as the Israelis are gearing up, as we just talked about with Raf, for this ground invasion, essentially. By all accounts, what appears to be preparations for that. Talk a little bit about some of our other new reporting on the messaging around this, the intentional messaging coming from the State Department not to say things like de-escalation or ceasefire.
That's right. We've seen a challenge from the U.S. government over the last week or so to figure out exactly what kind of language they want to use around this. In fact, there were some tweets in the first day or so from the State Department and associated with Secretary Blinken talking about a ceasefire that were then deleted. And these new guidelines that have been quietly sent out to some State Department officials involved in messaging on this seem to make clear that the U.S. government is trying to avoid saying anything at this point in time that could be construed as saying that the U.S. is pushing or publicly pressuring Israel to restrain itself. But it is a fine line because, on the other hand, the U.S. is also, of course, publicly and privately calling for civilians to be protected, for Israel to abide by international laws and the rules of war. And so you see an effort by the U.S. Not to try to tie Israel's hands behind its back, but also to make sure it's sending a message that human rights and protecting civilians is important to the U.S. government.
Josh Letterman, live for us there in northern Israel. Josh, thank you for being there and for your reporting. I want to bring in now Tahar Herzala, a grad student in Minnesota with family in Gaza. Tahar, I understand that about half your family has evacuated to the south. The other half has not. How are they doing? What was the last you heard? Tahar, it's Hallie Jackson. Can you hear us okay?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
That's okay. You know what? How about now, if you've been able to unmute? I know there's always some tech issues in these kinds of interviews. Any better luck now? Okay. We're going to get back to that. We're going to fix some of those tech gremlins and speak with Tahar in just a moment. But in the meantime, let's talk more about what this potential ground incursion would look like, because new video into us tonight shows Hamas have been training for this terror attack on Israel in plain sight weeks before it even happened. You can see some of that video here posted by Hamas specifically, showing this essential replica of Israel's Iron Wall, so-called, a replica of an entire town with the terrorists essentially practicing what that would look like. I want to bring in NBC's Courtney Cubie now, who is live for us at the Pentagon. Courtney, talk to us about, when we look at sort of the response now that Israel is preparing after this terror attack. Part of the issue here, we've talked about this a lot on this show, is there's a lot of tunnels in Gaza, right? I mean, that has been a way that Hamas gets around, what they use to hide weapons, people, et cetera. What is the plan of attack on that front? Explain what your sources are saying.
Yeah, so, I mean, as far as we know, there are upwards of hundreds of kilometers of these tunnels, and they're underneath Gaza. So they can move people, as you said, Hallie, they can move equipment and weapons in and out of Gaza. They've been a critical element to Hamas's ability to move weapons and things, and also to maintain some of their anonymity and their ability to hide from the Israelis. So all that being said, they're underneath the city with millions of people overhead. So it presents a real a tactical problem for any kind of military who's trying to get after Hamas when they may be in these extensive underground tunnels. Now, the U.S. military and the Pentagon are providing Israel, the IDF specifically, with a number of potential things that could help going after these tunnels. Number one is they have U.S. officials are helping Israel and trying to identify where some Hamas targets may be in these tunnels, a very difficult undertaking. And I should say, the Israelis have pretty exquisite intelligence when it comes to these things. The U.S. is supporting them in what they already have as a pretty strong infrastructure. That being said, the U.S. is also providing them with some munitions that could be used to go after some of these tunnel systems. So we know, for one thing, that the Iron Dome interceptors, we've heard about that. That's taking care of the air, mortars, artillery, and rockets. But underneath in the tunnels, they're also providing them with something called JDAM conversion kits. And what that means is it takes, I know, it's a lot of Pentagonese, right? That's essentially a sort of a kit that you can take a dumb bomb or a bomb that's not guided and turn it into a smart bomb or a bomb that becomes a precision-guided munition. Now, depending on the kind of munition or the bomb that you add this JDAM conversion kit to, it could have the ability to strike underground in some of these tunnel systems. Now, The big question is, how can Israel do that without killing civilians, and some of these hostages? And the reality is, the officials we talk to say, look, they are taking every effort that they can to try to avoid civilian casualties and hostages, but it's a difficult undertaking, Hallie.
Well, that's exactly the question, Court, that came up as I'm hearing you describe this new reporting from you and our colleague Dan DeLuz. Based on what you're hearing from your sources here, is destroying these tunnels. It is entirely possible, if not just likely, that Hamas is holding hostages, Israeli hostages, in some of these tunnels.
Yeah, not only holding them, and the other big question is, are they using them to move them around and even potentially to move them out of Gaza? That's been another big line of questioning for us. And the reality is U.S. officials just simply don't know if that's the case. But the IDF has been striking at areas that could be targeting some of these tunnel systems, potentially limiting Hamas's ability to move throughout them. So think about it. You know, if you have an underground tunnel and you hit one area and you hit another area, well, you've then blocked the people into that place. It wouldn't be unprecedented for the Israelis to hit some of these tunnels in the past. Hamas has been able to essentially just dig them back out and continue to use them. The question is if they are relentlessly striking them here, will they really be able to restrict some of Hamas's movement, including with some of those hostages? And that's going to be something that we'll continue to ask questions about and watch for.
As top administration officials have said, that Hamas is using people and has used civilians as human shields, essentially. Courtney Kuby, thank you so much for that reporting. I know it's been a lot, and I appreciate that. I want to get back to the region now because we're just learning that a Reuters journalist has been killed. 2 others hurt in southern Lebanon today. Issam Abdullah was part of a crew putting out a live signal with Reuters late today, releasing some video. I want to show you. Reuters muted the rest, obviously out of respect. There is an image of the aftermath that is graphic from the Associated Press of somebody who's been, I want to warn you that, somebody who's been injured, essentially being carried away. There is now intense attention on the Israeli-Lebanese border now. I want to bring in Matt Bradley, who is not too far from that border. Talk to us about what it's like where you are, what we know about what happened here, and the potential. And this has been a concern since the earliest hours of this Hamas terror attack on Israel was, what does Hezbollah in Lebanon do now?
Yeah, that's a big question. It's a big question for Hezbollah and a big question for Iran, the big benefactor of Hezbollah and Hamas. And that's what we were talking about. You know, we've been talking about this all week. And actually, the foreign minister of Iran just landed yesterday in Beirut. He was speaking about this question. And, you know, we've been hearing from Hezbollah officials and from people who are kind of close to the group, kind of adjacent to it, talking about whether or not Hezbollah is going to join the fight. And we can take their word at face value. They say that a decision hasn't been made. They're awaiting a decision. But this was a day of rage throughout the Arab and Muslim world, with people coming out at the behest, at the call of Hamas, who asked them all to express their anger at Israel as Israeli troops muster along the border with Gaza, prepared for this massive incursion that we've all been hearing about. So, you know, whether or not Hezbollah is going to join in, Hezbollah probably, according to analysts and others that I've been speaking to, saw itself as kind of a deterrent to prevent the Israelis from going in and destroying Hamas and killing lots of civilians in the Gaza Strip. Now, whether or not they end up being that deterrent, that's hard to know, because it looks as though the Israelis are more determined than ever. They have more international backing than ever. And it's unclear whether or not they're going to be bending some of the rules of international war, which they've done in the past, and whether or not they're going to be calling upon Hezbollah in order to split the Israeli army and drag them up north. Whether or not that will be a deterrent at all, with all of these reservists who have been called in, some more than 360,000, if Hezbollah can deter or can split the Israeli military. But I was at the border just today, Hallie, and, you know, we've been seeing, as you were talking about, this journalist who was killed. There were a number of others who were injured. This is really heating up along this border right behind me. Hallie?
Matt Bradley, live for us there in southern Lebanon. Matt, please stay safe, you and your crew, of course. We're glad to have you there. I want to bring in now Eliav Benjamin, Deputy Head of Mission at the Israeli Embassy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Hallie.
Of course. Can you give us a sense, a status update, if you will, on where Israel stands right now related to the war footing and the potential for this ground incursion into Gaza?
Yes, as you've seen, Hallie, and I'm sure the viewers have seen as well, we are in preparation to take out Hamas. That's clear cut. and we'll do everything that we need to do in order to make sure that it happens. And we'll do it in a way that the least civilians as possible would be affected by it in person. You can see people leaving their homes. We've given notice, and we will take out whatever we need to take out in order for the citizens of Israel to be able to live again in safety and security in their own homes, in Israel, in their sovereign land.
We started our show talking about how we are now 25 hours after the start of that 24-hour deadline that Israel first gave to these civilians in northern Gaza to try to get out of that area, to try to get further south here. It has obviously been a fairly, from what we have seen and from our teams on the ground, fairly quiet evening, as it is now past 1 a.m. there so far. Is this an indication that Israel is going to give more time to those civilians in Gaza to get out? Is that under consideration at this moment?
Hallie, I don't know what you call a quiet evening when since the beginning of
all I mean by that, sir, is that it does not appear that the ground incursion has begun. That's all I'm saying to that point.
Yes, but meanwhile, we've had another over 100 attacks of missiles by Hamas into Israel over the past 12 hours. We are not going to share with the public, and not even with on this platform right now, I'm afraid, with our exact operational plans of when we go in, where we go in, and what we'll actually do. We'll go in when we sense the time is right, and when we sense the forces are ready and the ground is ripe for it.
Can you talk a bit about the Israeli government's response to some of the calls from some of the international community to allow further medical help, for example, to get into Gaza, to allow safe passage out?
Ali, let's not forget, we are at war that Israel did not start. Israel is going to finish this. Israel will do what it has to do in order to protect its own people. We are at war. And yes, there are issues that we're dealing with when it comes to the military law and conflict laws of conflict and so on. We are working way within these boundaries, and we'll continue to do everything we need to in order to protect our people, while doing the most possible in order not to affect those who aren't involved. Anything that people have complaints about, there is one direction to point the finger. That is Hamas, who's holding its own people as hostages, as well as about close to 150, if not more, civilians from Israel.
Can I ask you, as a bit perhaps of a more personal reflection here, it is obviously Friday night. We've had a team in Jerusalem. We have teams around the world as Jewish people around the world are lighting candles on the Sabbath, this moment of solidarity that feels, I think, for some people so critically important, the Jewish community globally coming together here to show support for Israel. Can you talk perhaps briefly about what that means to you?
Sure. I'm an Orthodox Jew. It's Friday evening. I'm in D.C. now. I should be home lighting candles, having a Saturday meal with my family. Last Saturday, I was here at the embassy. Our friends, brothers, literally my brother, who lives in Netiv HaSara, which is the closest village to Gaza, the first village that was attacked. He was in his safe room on Simchat Torah, which was a Jewish holiday, sitting in his safe room for 12 hours with his family, not knowing what's going to happen, and me not knowing exactly what's happening with him. During a time which is going to be a solemn time, a time of enjoying, resting from the week, enjoying the festive Jewish holiday. That was last week, and this is this week as well. My brother is now spending time with my other brother, basically a refugee on his own, like others around the Gaza Strip who left their homes for fear of what Hamas might do next. And this is the way that we live now, as Jews, as people in Israel, as people also here, working around the clock, around the world for our missions in order to bring safety and security to people in Israel. That's what this is all about. We are fighting for our security.
Eliav Benjamin, thank you so much for those reflections and for sharing some of your story. We appreciate you being with us tonight. in just the last couple of hours. Also here in Washington, President Biden is pointing to the work that his team is doing to try to get some of these Americans captured by Hamas home after talking via Zoom with several families of those American hostages in Gaza. These are some new pictures that are just coming into us as released by the White House that they say is of that, again, Zoom conversation that the president had. Some 14 Americans are still not accounted for, with at least some of them believed to have been kidnapped by Hamas. I want to bring in now NBC's Hallie Raffa, who is posted up just outside the White House for us. What else do we know about that conversation, that call with those families, Hallie? And what else are you hearing from the White House tonight?
Yeah, Hallie, you're seeing those new photos released by the White House of the president in the Oval Office meeting with his national security team and speaking for over an hour on this Zoom call with these family members of those 14 Americans still unaccounted for, believed to be potentially among the roughly 150 people who have been taken hostage from Israel, taken into Gaza by Hamas since Saturday, almost a week ago today. And so we know that the president said that it was very important for him personally to speak with these family members. And the White House says that during this call, the president told these family members that they continue to be in his prayers. He reaffirmed that the U.S. is doing everything in its power to be able to recover their family members. They also said that several officials on this call answered any questions about these extremely challenging ongoing recovery efforts for these family members. And the president also talked about this himself ahead of his remarks at a Bidenomics event in Philadelphia earlier today. Hallie, listen to a bit of what he had to say.
They're going through agony, not knowing what the status of their sons, daughters, husbands, wives, children are. You know, it's gut-wrenching. I assured them my personal commitment to do everything possible to return every missing American to their families.
And Hallie, these hostage recovery efforts also top of mind for Secretary of State Antony Blinken while he was visiting Qatar today, using countries that have channels of communication with Hamas leadership to make this effort potentially a little bit easier for U.S. officials, Hallie.
There has also been, I know, some reporting efforts done by our team about a bit of a curtain pullback, what it's like behind the scenes inside the White House as they respond to this crisis here. Talk us through that.
Yeah, you think of the very few degrees of separation that most of us here in the U.S. have to the Jewish community and people in Israel, and the Biden administration is not exempt from that. These are administration officials who, as part of their regular part of their job, is to deal with these global crises. But we know from several administration officials who spoke to our team how difficult the past few days have been. Some of them saying that at times the officials have been teary-eyed or have gotten choked up just talking about the images and the videos that we've been seeing circulated from half a world away. And we also know that the president has reached out to some of them who currently have family members that they continue to text and check in on who are currently still in Israel, Hallie.
Hallie Raffa live for us outside the White House. Hallie, thank you so much. We're going to have a lot more on our top story, of course, the war between Israel and Hamas, including the extra security now happening in big cities across the country here at home tonight after the former Hamas leader called for a day of anger today. We'll get into that next. Plus, top House lawmakers meeting about how to get Israel more help, but can they actually do anything without a speaker? A gut check there later this hour. I want to go back now to Taher Herzala, a graduate student in Minnesota with family in Gaza, as we talk about the crisis that is unfolding overseas. Taher, I just want to make sure that you can hear me okay?
I do, loud and clear.
Thank you. I understand that about half the family that you have in Gaza has evacuated down to the southern part. About half remain up north. Where are they now? What's the latest? When was the last time you were able to speak with them?
Last time I was able to make connection with my family was this morning. They informed me that part of the family did definitely leave their homes due to the evacuation order and headed south past the Wadi Gaza area. The other half of the family was not able to leave for various reasons and remain in Gaza City today.
How are the comms now?
I have not been able to reach them since this morning. There are reports that the internet has been cut off, and I know electricity has been cut off as well. So family members are finding it hard to charge their telephones and remain in contact with us.
What was their, how do they sound in these messages with you? I don't know if you're talking on the phone or on WhatsApp, just on text or doing video chats or what, but talk to me about sort of the way that they seemed as the family who was leaving was trying to get out.
They are so afraid of what's to come, Hallie. They are telling us, sending us messages as if it's their last message, sending their salutations and love to our family members, essentially saying their goodbyes as if this is going to be the last time that they will ever speak to us. The bombardment on our neighborhood and Rimal was relentless. It was absolute carnage. The Israelis bombed entire neighborhoods, wiped out an entire street in our neighborhood. All the apartment buildings in that neighborhood have been completely decimated. Thousands of people from our neighborhood are displaced. And every message that I get is more heartbreaking than the next. People are trying to move their elderly parents out of their homes, and they cannot because the roads have been completely destroyed due to Israeli bombardment. It's not like, they're wheelchair accessible or anything like that. You can't move elderly people so easily in that situation. And so it's just an utterly devastating situation, Hallie, that I really find hard to describe.
You talk about how there are reports about the internet. Obviously, we know the electricity cutoffs, water, food potentially becoming difficult to find. Do you understand, for the family that is remaining in northern Gaza, are they stockpiling resources if they plan to stay? Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, they told me that they went to the stores 2 days ago and stocked up as much as they could with what was remaining on their shelf. The stores have not restocked themselves, and so there's no more access to food now, and whatever's in their pantry is what they will have to eat for the rest of the time that they are under aerial bombardment.
What message, if you could get to your family right now, would you get to them?
The message that I want to send to the people of Gaza is that the whole world sees what is taking place in Gaza. We all are bearing witness to this genocidal rampage that Israel has been engaged in over the past week. We are with you. We are trying to speak to the world and relay your message to the world that innocent people need to be spared. A ceasefire needs to be announced. And we hope and pray that better minds come together and understand the travesty and the tragedy of what is unfolding so that we can end this human suffering that is taking place in front of us.
Taha Herzallah, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the president of Harvard says the school will not punish the students behind that controversial letter blaming Israel for the Hamas terror attack that killed more than 1,000 Israelis just about a week ago. She says that while a lot of people find that letter objectionable, even outrageous, the school has a commitment to free expression. We've told you how some of the students involved to face backlash, including some CEOs pledging not to hire any of them. Number 2, the CDC says flu rates are starting to go up across the country a little bit. For bigger picture context, cases generally are still relatively low. Health officials say they're not seeing that very concerning spike that happened right around this time last year, but they are recommending that people 6 months and older, so babies to adults, get an annual flu shot. Number 3, Best Buy is saying goodbye to its Blu-ray DVDs. The company spokesperson tells Variety that starting next year, it plans to phase out DVD sales in stores and online. They say doing so gives them more space and opportunity, in their words. This is just about a month after Netflix shut down its DVD delivery service. Number 4, the Taylor Swift Eras Tour concert movie hit the big screen just about a day early, making $3 million its first night, even though fans only had 8 hours to buy a ticket. The film's expected to make up to $150 million this week alone. Number 5, a rare so-called ring of fire will be visible across the country tomorrow. In every state, you're going to be able to see something of this partial solar eclipse. Some states are going to actually see the moon almost totally cover the sun. We have to warn you, because officials warn you, do not look directly into the sun during an eclipse. Wear the special glasses or just avert your eyes for a couple of minutes. We're going to be right back. Cities across the country stepping up security today after a former Hamas leader called for a global day of anger. But some of the demonstrations coast to coast feeling tense. Police in New York arrested a city councilwoman today after she was seen online with a gun at a pro-Palestinian rally at Brooklyn College, with police saying she described the demonstrators there as nothing short of terrorists without the bombs. Other big cities, D.C., Miami, L.A., all starting to beef up some of their police presence as officials are trying to look for any potential threats online. So far, they say mostly it is precautionary. George Solis is joining us now. Talk to us about what it's like in New York, because that city specifically has the biggest Jewish population outside of Israel.
Yeah, Hallie, so far no credible threats, with the NYPD not taking any chances. Even today during a pro-Palestine rally here, we saw them in full force. They were making sure people weren't lingering for too long, making sure anyone on the sidewalk wasn't there for too long. They, of course, had the cameras. They, of course, had drones out here keeping an eye on every movement. Even now, some small pockets of those demonstrations are still happening right now, and you could see them just on every corner. Every officer is also in uniform, at least those that are not undercover or not on some special detail, and that has been much the case across the country at a number of these demonstrations that we have seen, not just today, but over the last several days. There's enhanced police at Jewish schools and synagogues and even some consulates, including here in New York as well. And obviously, the key thing that the officials want people to know is that there has been no credible threat. What they do say is they are monitoring a lot of online chatter, and so far that is all that there has been. Again, not taking any chances. Even here during the rally today, though, as people were seeing this enhanced presence, they were still spreading their message. They were still wanting their voices to be heard. I had a conversation with someone here on the pro-Palestinian side who is talking about some of the things happening in Gaza right now. Some of it a little hard to hear, but take a listen to my conversation with him.
The building next door was bombed. And when that happens, the whole block, all the houses there, they get affected. So they ran out as their own building, even though it wasn't bombed, started crippling down. Right now we heard that they're asking people in the north of Gaza to move away from there. Where are they going to go? You know, there's no place to go. And
yeah, Hallie, of course, no one letting their guard down because the day, of course, is not over here. So one thing that not just the NYPD, but law enforcement across the country are asking people to do is, of course, to be vigilant. If you see something, to say something, because that is the only other way to combat any potential threats. But we stress, again, no credible threats as of this hour. And again, you might be able to hear some of these pro-Israel, pro-Palestinian rallies still happening here behind me. Things tense, yes, but they have remained mostly peaceful. Hallie?
George Solis live for us there in New York. George, thank you. Coming up here on the show, France raising its security alert to its highest level after a teacher was stabbed and killed. Why police say the suspect was already under surveillance. Next. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our teams around the world have done it for you. Here's some of what they're keeping an eye on in a segment we call The Global. In France, the country's on high alert after somebody stabbed a teacher to death and seriously hurt 2 other people. The French president called it an act of barbaric Islamic terrorism. The suspect, a Russian-born Chechen, was arrested. Police say he was on a state watch list as a potential security risk. In Spain, a wildfire in the north of the country is burning more than 1,100 acres. Firefighters say they're confident they can get it under control, but it is starting to burn close to some areas that have more people living there. Spain has been having unseasonably hot weather the past few weeks. And in China, new numbers show the country just had something like 9.5 million births last year, a 10% drop from the year before. That brings the birth rate there to the lowest ever on record in that country. China's big population is getting older, with the government trying to roll out some different policies here, like more childcare and even financial incentives for having kids. In just the last few minutes, we are finding out that the House will be without a speaker and therefore paralyzed on Israel action, at least until Monday night. That's even after House Republicans took another shot at nominating somebody to lead them as Speaker. This time, it's Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan who's coming out as the Speaker nominee, if you will. And in a split screen, White House officials are meeting with some top lawmakers and staffs on how to move forward with trying to get help to Israel as this war is intensifying. NBC's Hallie is following this one for us. And Hallie, let me start with what we've seen in just the last hour or so there on Capitol Hill, because while this issue of what's happening in Israel and in Gaza is looming over all of this, we're sort of in a holding pattern on Capitol Hill until Monday night. Explain that.
In a holding pattern until Monday night, and honestly, Hallie, I think it's going to be a holding pattern even beyond that. Consider Monday the chance for the Republicans to come back to town and see if anything has changed. Because for Jim Jordan, they are leaving town today because he's so short of the 217 votes that he would need for them to take this to the House floor and have him successfully be nominated as Speaker. So long as that's the problem, Jim Jordan has some explaining, cajoling, convincing to do of more than 24 members of his conference. He's got like 50 people who said in a secret ballot that they wouldn't vote for him if they were to take this to the floor, all things staying the same as they are right now. That's a problem. I think what's going to happen is when you see them come back Monday night, they will technically come back into session. You'll probably see them huddle in the same room that we've seen them huddle in now for many hours over the course of the last several days. And we'll see what the path forward looks like for Jordan. If it looks like he's close enough to the votes, sure, we could see Tuesday in a floor vote. But there's also other names that could be in the mix if they're reaching another impasse. Really, a lot of this is just kind of up in the air, and we'll see it unfold in real time. But as long as there's confusion, as long as our clock keeps counting the number of days and hours where the House hasn't had a speaker, none of the aid that you talked about, even if the White House wants to present it to Congress, none of it's moving anywhere in the House.
What about this idea floated that Patrick McHenry, who is currently the kind of caretaker speaker pro tem, he's in there just to kind of make sure that they can, when they go to elect a speaker, actually do that, could potentially take over for a longer, shorter term period, maybe a couple of months, get through the Israel aid, get through the government shutdown that is looming come middle of next month?
Maybe. I mean, it's one of the theories that we're sort of tracking. I think that in order to get to any of these like West Wing type scenarios where someone coalesces in bipartisan fashion, be it around McHenry, who's the pro tempore speaker right now, and basically just has the function of gaveling in, gaveling out, and telling them when they should gather, there's really not much else that he can do. So there is a world in which everyone could come together and say, hey, let's empower him so we can do resolutions condemning Hamas. We can do resolutions and send aid, humanitarian and military in nature, to Israel, to Ukraine. There is a world that could happen in, but I think that's like Earth 3, and I think we're still squarely on Earth 1. My sense from talking to Republicans and Democrats is that in order to get to any kind of bipartisan scenario, Republicans are going to have to fail internally just a few more times before frustration reaches a fever pitch that they feel comfortable looking across the aisle.
I take your point on Earth 3 versus Earth 1, Hallie, but on Earth 1, there's no speaker, right? So, like, something's got to give here. So let's say if the most likely scenario is that Jim Jordan somehow consolidates more of the conference behind him, what is he going to have to do to actually get that done? Is it even possible in the next 72 hours?
They say it's possible. Allies of Jordan say he can get those votes. He just has to have more time to build a coalition. There's also a scenario where moderates who are uncomfortable with Jordan suddenly figure out that they have just as much of a voice in this as the more far-right folks have often been leveraging their voice in this, and maybe moderates find a way to move forward with a path of their choosing. I think that's the less likely option, but I honestly don't know how this is going to shake out.
Hallie Vitale, what I do know is that you will be there watching and covering every minute of it, and we'll have you back when it happens. Thank you, friend.
Thank you.
Still to come here tonight. Back to our top story. A moment of unity tonight as Jewish people around the world celebrate the Sabbath for the first time since the attack by Hamas. Our reporters in Jerusalem for us live coming up. Tonight, the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, says hundreds of thousands of Israelis are running from their Shabbat dinner tables to bomb shelters as alarms sound across the country on this Sabbath. It's Shabbat now, and Israeli rabbis are telling people to listen to national emergency instructions from the government and the IDF about whether it's safe to go out to pray in the middle of this war. The Western Wall, the most religious site in the world for Jewish people, is usually crowded, especially on the Sabbath. Tonight, you see there, it is practically empty. And Jewish people around the world are posting pictures, lighting their candles tonight. You see some of those photographs here to show support for Israel, for those Israeli families, the victims, the survivors, those who are thinking about their loved ones trapped, taken and abducted by Hamas. I want to bring Kelly Kobier in, who's live for us in Jerusalem. Kelly, talk to us about what you're seeing there and this moment here on this Friday night.
Yeah, a lot of people saying prayers tonight for missing loved ones, for people they may not even know, for all that the country has gone through just in the past several days. Shabbat, in case you're not familiar, is happens every week. It's the holiday on Friday. It's the day of rest. It starts at sunset and goes until sunset on Saturday, and families typically light candles. Some may say a prayer. They all sit around for dinner. That is the big event. And for a lot of families here, there are seats that are empty tonight. We spent some time with the Eshel family. Their 19-year-old daughter, Roni, they say was kidnapped from her safe room on Saturday. They haven't heard from her since about 9:27 in the morning on Saturday when she and her mom exchanged some texts. She was telling her mom that she's just fine. Her mom said tonight this is their first Shabbat without her. Take a listen to what she said.
They were just having a normal Saturday morning, and somebody just kidnapped them from their houses, from the beds. And as a mother, it's like a living hell for me, because I can't help her. I don't know where is she. I can't do anything to support her.
A lot of families really struggling with that tonight. And not only are chairs empty because of the missing, because of those killed and captured, but also because of the soldiers getting ready for what the Prime Minister has said will be a long and difficult war. And, you know, many reservists being called up as well, Hallie.
And to that point, Kelly, we are hearing now that Israel's El Al Airlines is going to fly for the first time in 4 decades on the Jewish Sabbath tomorrow because of this reservist issue, to bring people in the reserve army back to Israel to fight. We know that a lot of airlines have suspended flights to Israel right now. That in and of itself, I think, says a lot about this extraordinary moment.
Yeah, you know, it's really tough to get into Tel Aviv right now. A lot of flights have been canceled. Airlines still announcing that they're no longer going to fly here. And El Al actually say that they got special permission, a religious exemption, in order to fly on the Sabbath. It falls under a special Jewish legal precedent that said saving lives trumps all else, all other religious obligations. So that's why El Al is flying. And there's a tremendous number of reservists being called up. As we've said before, 360,000 reservists. Many of them are in this country, but a lot are abroad as well. This is the largest mobilization in 50 years, if you can imagine, since the Yom Kippur War. And people are flying in from all over the world, from New York, from other parts in the U.S., from as far as India and Thailand. Lots of Israelis coming home to be a part of this very difficult few days, weeks ahead. Hallie.
Can you just take a beat, Kelly, reflect on what it is like at this moment to be in Jerusalem right now?
Yeah, you know, I've been to Jerusalem many times before, and it's such a strange mix of this sort of somber, sad feeling, a very quiet feeling in East Jerusalem as well as in West Jerusalem. At the Western Wall today, to see it that empty, to see only half a dozen people there on a Friday was stunning, really. To be here in front of Damascus Gate in East Jerusalem for Friday prayers today, and just seeing a trickle of men all over the age of 50 coming out after Friday prayers. You know, it was remarkable to just see a group of tourists standing in front of Damascus Gate, not the, you know, thousands of people who are typically here for what is also a very important day for Palestinians and for Muslims to come here and pray at Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's a very different feeling, Hallie, and in a lot of ways, Jerusalem almost feels empty. There are police officers everywhere today, but that usual hum of life just seems missing today.
Kelly Kobier, thank you so much for that. Thank you for being there. We really appreciate your reporting here at this moment. Thanks. That does it for us for this hour. We've got more coverage picking up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.